Hi, I'm Vin. This is Vlog Family Off Grid. Today, we're gonna make applesauce. Come on in.
Hello and welcome to the Little House. Today we're making Aunt Dolly's cranberry applesauce. We just came back from our holiday travel where I got to see my sister Dolly. This is my big sister Dolly. She's the best cook I know. We got some apples. They're a little worse for the wear. It's kind of late in the season to be preserving apples, but we can still make something of them. And my sister showed me how she's been making applesauce lately with cranberries, a very convenient recipe for the moment since we also have some leftover cranberries from Christmas dinner. This is an incredibly simple recipe, and it is not my sister's way to have a lot of measurements or specific directions. So you may find this just as common sense and intuitive as a recipe possibly can be. But we've found here in the Little House, living the simple life, that some of the best things in life are already pretty wonderful, and you just need to get out of their way and let them be great. So the first decision you need to make if you're making applesauce is consistency. We're a chunky applesauce family, and that's ideal for this recipe because we're going to put the cranberries in whole. So that really just affects what your tool is for how you're preparing the apples. If you want a really smooth consistency, you probably want a food mill. But we're doing our applesauce with an apple corer peeler, and then we just slice through once with a knife so that the rounds are separated. If you didn't have an apple corer peeler and you wanted to achieve precisely the same effect, peel and quarter your apple and then slice it thinly end to end, and you'll have exactly the same result. So much of the cooking that my sister does and that my mother, Esther Emery, did isn't really about adding things to the food. It's about manipulating your ingredients so that they have a great texture and they're appealing just as they are. So we're going to can up quarts of applesauce that are just apples with nothing else in it. And then we're going to do the rest in pints with cranberries in it that my kids will put right on pancakes and also in their morning oatmeal. So let me show you my setup. I have every burner of this propane stove in use. We are off grid, but we have propane here. These two things in the back are where I'm going to do my processing. Both apples and cranberries are acidic foods, and so it's okay to use a hot water bath canner. Now what's confusing is that I'm pointing to a pressure canner. This is my beloved Presto pressure canner, but it's not locked. The lid's not locked down. We're using it just as a hot water bath canner. I have my jars already in there, you can see. I want the jars hot and I want the water hot, so the burner is on underneath this and I am going to bring it to a boil. As far as water level goes, it's great to have the water level just right above the top of your empty jars so that when your jars are full, displacement will cause that water level to go up just a couple of inches. You want the water level at least 2 inches above your jars all the way through the processing time. But you don't want so much water that you've got boiling water in the way that you need to find some way to get rid of. So the water level that I go for is just right above the top of my empty jars. And that's one of the places where I'm doing processing. The other one is just a stock pot. This is a large stock pot, and the trick here is that there's a layer of rings on the bottom. So you can imagine the rings like this across the bottom, and that keeps the jars from touching the heat source and having the bottoms crack off. So if you have some extra lids, you can turn any pan into a canner. So the back 2 burners are being used for processing. I'm using the front 2 burners to make the applesauce. This is a batch that's nearly ready, and this is a batch that we're just beginning. I have them in my small, heavy bottom pots because there's less of a chance of burning that way, and I don't have to worry about it if I have to step away. If you're cooking applesauce on a thin bottomed pan, you really have to watch it pretty closely. If it scorches, that flavor gets into your whole batch and can be super frustrating. So I'm playing it safe, doing small batches in my nice heavy bottomed pans. This is very close to the canning stage. You can see it still has some kind of hard chunks. I'm going to keep tasting those occasionally or squishing them with my spoon, and I'm not going to can them until they're pretty soft, but I am going to catch it while they still have that shape. This over here is how I start the applesauce, and it's so easy. All you have to do is add some liquid so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. If your apples are fresh, that only needs to be a 1/4 cup or 1/2 cup of water. If your apples are older, you want to do a little bit more. If your apples may have dried out, I'll probably add a full cup here. So here's my liquid. And I don't use a masher, I just use my wooden spoon. So you can't get a recipe out of my sister Dolly. Some apples, some cranberries, as much cranberries as you want. We did opt for a bit fewer than her sample that she sent. My son Milo likes Dolly's a lot, but it's a very, very strong flavor of cranberry. So we went a little bit more moderate. This is 1 bag of cranberries, 1 regular sized bag of cranberries to about 4 quarts of apples. And I'm not going to cook them together. I'm just going to mix it up and start filling my jars for processing. And that's exactly how I like my applesauce. You can see that consistency there. The chunks are all soft, but there's still a thickness to it. It'll soften up even more while it's processing, but those chunks will keep their shape. And now it's time to fill the jars. So I'm going to pull my jars right out of the hot water and set them on the towel before I fill them. If you have some counter space right beside your stove, that can be convenient. We'll have to make a note to the master builder here in the little house. With applesauce, you're going for a 1/2 inch headspace, which is the distance between the top of the food and the inside of the jar lid. But I'll have to squish it down and get the bubbles out before I know what my level is for sure. My favorite tool for getting bubbles out is a small spatula. Especially if you're trying to give this as a gift or wanting it to look really nice, you do want those bubbles out. It also affects the headspace. So I'm happy with the height of the applesauce in each of these jars, about a 1/2 inch below what will be the dome lid. I don't like to process jars that are under. I do see people do it, and I guess for applesauce it's not that big of a deal, but that headspace needs to correspond with your processing time, which is why when you pressure can meats or soups, you have a full inch headspace, sometimes even 1.5 inches headspace, because that processing time it's a lot of heat for a long period of time. For applesauce, this is only 20 minutes, 25 minutes, or if you're at a high elevation, and you really need to hit that 1/2 inch headspace to make it a good seal. And then it's also super important to clean the rims. Any bit of food that's on the top surface there can keep your jars from sealing. I have my lids and rings in warm water, actually hot water, but not boiling. You're not supposed to keep the lids at a boil for a period of time, but you do want them hot. Another quick little trick. It's super frustrating when your lids stick together in the water. Can I get an amen from anybody who has done a lot of canning? So what I do is I alternate the direction that they're facing. So I do some lids facing up, and then some lids facing down, and then some lids facing up. And that way when you pull them out of the water, they aren't stuck to one another. And your rings go on finger tight. So do give them a good push, but not a crazy good push. Just as much as your hands can naturally, comfortably do. You want air to be able to escape. That's what creates the seal. but you don't want water to be able to get in. I had one fewer jars than I expected, so that one's just partially full. So I put that back in empty so that the jars don't tip over. But that's exactly the water level that I want, about 2 inches above. And I'll put the lid on and process for 20 minutes. I don't start the timer until it is at a full boil, and then time for 20 minutes at a full boil, and then we'll take them out and set them on our towel and listen for the pings to see that they've sealed properly. And here is Esther's version of Dolly's cranberry applesauce. It's gonna be yummy.
Good night, little house. My mom is a good cook.